welcome to episode 4 of Impact Ed.
Hello there.
You'll recall in our last episode, we looked at the situational analysis process and we called out 11 important sub-elements, each one a discrete area of focus that will allow you to build a high-quality situational analysis to inform your new school improvement plan. Today, we're going to have a look into one of those elements, literacy.
And when we say literacy, we're actually going to look very closely at reading because I think we need to demonstrate a process that you could apply to all areas of literacy. So that's why we're starting there.
So let's go. Even as a high school trained teacher, I recognise just how complex teaching reading is.
It is complex. It's hard for kids to learn to read. It's hard to have a consistent system that delivers that instruction across the school. If we just pull the teaching elements out just as a baseline, these are from the CZ research paper on early literacy. There's 6 independent elements. Now imagine a subject area where you have to be delivering 6 separate things consistently and all the time. So we've got phonics, phonemic awareness, the oral language that sits around the background of the student. Then we've got vocabulary, comprehension and fluency. So 6 really complex elements. Some of those are constrained skills. You teach them early on and you don't have to touch them again, but some of them have to be delivered every day. Add to that the complexity of the program design of your school's reading program. So what are the systems and processes that support all of those elements being delivered constantly every day?
We haven't looked at consistency of teacher practice or the fidelity of the program yet. So let's examine each one individually.
Yeah, more importantly, let's talk about a simple 3-step process that schools can apply to this. Steve, I have a belief that most teachers do the right thing in the right order most of the time, which is why when we're looking at self-evaluation that we don't devalue that. And so the process I'm proposing, I'm calling it a tune-up because I think it recognises that most people have got it mostly right. But I just showed you those cogs. Reading is really complex. And so, what if we weren't doing one of those elements well? I think we need a process where we can systematically look at all of the elements of the program. And so that's why I've proposed the tune-up. So basically, the first step is looking at your data and what your data's telling you. The second step is comparing your school's process to the evidence base. And finally, that synthesis phase where you sit down and you make sense of both sets of information. Really important at this point. Don't go racing off making decisions on the data alone. Likewise, if we were looking at the program itself, we wouldn't be making decisions on that alone. You've got to wait till all of the parts of the jigsaw are there before we move forward. Today's episode is only dealing with step 1, what your data tells you. Steps 2 and 3 will be separate episodes. But just comparing this approach to the general principles of situational analysis, it's easy to see the 3 steps. Looking inward, today we're looking inward at our data. Looking outward, that's when we compare our approach to the research base. And looking forward, that's when we make the decisions about where to next. But for today's episode, some data tools that will get you started with analysing your reading. We're going to start with what we call a domain overview, then some analysis tools that are more longitudinal, and then some that put faces to the data. All right, so this is what I refer to as the domain overview, Steve. So as you can see, I've started in Scout here, and I'm going to school versus SSG and state, and you can see I've put a school bus there to disguise the true identity of this school. In this view, percentage in band category, you're going to be able to view the names or the statistics and also get to the names of the people in the top, middle and bottom 2 bands. You can look at it forever in Scout, but I find it easy to have all of that information in one place for the sake of a robust discussion. So as you can see here, I'm using export data. And as soon as I click on that and click export, it's putting it in my downloads folder in...
And I like taking it out, James, because me manipulating the data is very equivalent to Lynn Sharrett's putting faces to the data. And once you work with it and interpret it, it means so much more than just looking at it.
You go into Excel, and if you just press open, your downloads will be there, and you'll see the 3 different files. As they open, I just copy the data that's sitting there. I make sure I capture all of it. Control C to copy, and then go to your master sheet, Control V to paste. And you will see there that you can put multiple sets of data on the one sheet of paper. A little Excel hack here. If you use text wrap for column headers, they suddenly become readable. What makes Excel look so scary is everything gets crunched in there and you can't really understand it. Now I'm making, here's the one I prepared earlier, and I'll explain how it all works. There's 3 data sets there, top, middle and bottom 2 skill bands, and graphs that go with them. How did I do the graph? I'm glad you asked. I'm capturing the data here. It's got the year column, the school column and the similar schools group column. I'm clicking recommended charts and I'm choosing the parallel column graph, and it gives me that chart that looks like that. There's other options there. I find this one's the easiest. And I've just put that chart next to the data, and I can go back to that, say that's the bottom 2 skill bands. So if I go next to the data that says middle 2 skill bands, do the same process. Now, some people enjoy a much broader view, and they might like to choose the DOE data as well, so you've got 2 comparison points. I've had these chats with most schools in Lake Macquarie West, Steve, and a lot of, I think it makes common sense for some of us to go to the similar schools, but I think other schools, and they'll know who they are more, I guess, aspirational in using the state as a mean.
And that would also go back to where they set their vision, James. If they're talking about being the highest in the state, well, then they'd certainly need to be comparing.
And all of a sudden, we've got 10 years of trend data in top, middle and bottom 2 skill bands. What a rich discussion starter for any school improvement team.
Great. So having captured that data, James, I think the most important thing here is that we're simply capturing data. We confront it, but we're not trying to explain it, excuse it, or justify it. It's simply a process of collecting at this stage, and what we now need to do is go and look for that secondary source or tertiary source so that we can triangulate. So where to next?
Item analysis, and let's look not just at this year's but at last year's and the years before, and see if we can identify any patterns there.
Great.
So Steve, I've cut off the Scout part of this. I think most people know where to go and find their item analysis. Again, we go to the 3 little dots that says more, and then I export the data. Now, this is data from the online version of the item analysis, which will apply to the last 2 years. As you can see, I've just exported the data as we did in the last example, and I've put it in a spreadsheet here. Now, this allows you to do many things. I think comparing your school's responses to the state responses is a really handy starting point. I've selected all of the data and I'm going sort and filter, and you'll see that I get the top, the column headers. Yep. And I've chosen DOE state difference. You can do this in the app as well.
But choose largest to smallest, look for the greatest difference.
That's right, and that's exactly what we're doing. What advantage you get over doing it in Excel is you can put multiple data sets in there and look at them all at once, just like we did with the top 2, bottom 2 and middle 2 skill bands. So I've put this exemplar spreadsheet on our page, yes, so you can have a look. And if you note the tabs down the bottom, I've got sample 1, sample 2, and that allows you to look at. And so we're looking for patterns here. You know, do we get the same sorts of questions wrong year in, year out? Well, you don't know until you look at all 3 data sets. So effectively, that's what this is about. And you can see now I've pulled out the areas of focus here on the right. And, identifies an author's assumption in a text, categorises information, so on and so forth. Let's build up a knowledge base of that information over several years, and all of a sudden we've got a really crucial piece of information about the effectiveness of our reading program.
Fantastic. So James, you've just collected a lot of rich data, and that can be daunting to people when they look at it. We recognise the importance of putting names to the data, but how do we go about that process?
Well, I've got two techniques I want to share with you, and both of them, I do both. They take no time at all. Let's go and look at the first one.
Okay, I like no time.
So in Scout, we're choosing NAPLAN, of course, and let it catch up. We're looking specifically at student results here, and we're looking at the tab that says growth across bands. Now, the first time you look at this, you might think, oh, some kids are going up, some kids are going down, but it's not. It's just, really, it's just like an air traffic control review of what's gone on. The best way to make sense of it is to export the data. So we're looking here at a range of results that have happened for a particular school, and essentially what we're looking at is where kids started in Year 3 and where they finished up in Year 5 in terms of band. And the right-hand column is telling you what number. So we're looking here at, if we look at row 3, there were 3 kids who started in band 1 and 4 kids who started in band 1 and ended up in band 4. If I look at the column I'm highlighting, there were 2 kids who started in band 1 and ended up in band 4. I'm making that green, Steve, because I think that's a pretty solid result. I'm making this dark green because I think going from band 1 to band 6 is a great result, but only 1 student made that change. This one's orange because this person went from band 4 to band 5. Is that good enough progress? Probably not in the context of the remainder of the samples that we have here. But you can see this tool is really starting to spell out what's happened. The red row there, that student, 4 students started in band 6 and were still in band 6 at the testing point. So I've put that red because that's like a danger sign for me.
Well, you would ask some questions looking at that as to whether we gave opportunity to extend the higher performing students.
Well, that's right. So, and look, that's telling you that was a band 6 student. So, yeah. Look, again, what a great conversation starter. And this sort of analysis is best done in a whole school team because everyone gets to a sense of where you're coming from and where you've gone to. And Steve, here's the second method I think makes a lot of sense. So I call this tracking cohorts. Again, we're in NAPLAN. We're going to look at student results and then we're going to go to the tab that says bands. We're going to select the 3 dots, export data just as before. Now this time we will get quite a large spreadsheet as a result and it will look a little bit like this. Now you can see I've changed the names of students here so that you can't, they're confidential. Yes, exactly. But we're looking at a data set here from 2019. And I'm going to start highlighting students in their bands, top bands, middle bands, bottom bands. And then I'm going to go looking for the same students' results from 2 years ago. Why? Because that was when they sat NAPLAN 3. And I'm able to also see where they landed then. So, and I'll have some key questions about whether students in the top 2 bands between the 2 testing points stayed there. The advantage of this method is I've actually got the students' names there on the page.
And I notice that while we're talking, James, you're busily highlighting cells. That's an arbitrary ruling that you're making on what you're seeing as good, okay, and of concern?
Again, the best Excel hack I can give you is to make it readable. I like colour. Lots of people don't need it, but if I highlight something for a colour, I'll go looking for it in the other spreadsheet. It makes it easier. And if you're trying to communicate your findings to someone else, the colour makes it really easy to demonstrate.
And it makes you in a primary school teacher now.
It does too. Look, I've put some questions in the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet's on the web page. How many bottom 2 bands students moved up? How many high-performing students are still performing at a high standard? That's a really important one. Just because they were in the top 2 skill bands doesn't mean they don't deserve intervention or support to keep them performing at a high level.
And on your very first question, how many bottom 2 band students moved up? That'd be a great question to have a look at your intervention team and say, who are those students, what happened for them, and then did we get bang for our buck?
Yeah, and what interventions work best for this group of students. Anyway, I reckon that's a winner, that version.
Great, love it. So James, you've taken us through a really strong process to collect data. And what I would be expecting now of every principal is that they would not just have the data, but they would have some evaluative statements where they're direct observations from what they're seeing from the data, but also I'd expect that they would have some good questions for further investigation.
Yeah, well, critical questioning is a really good strategy for pulling the truth out of the data. The other caveat I'd put in here, Steve, is to keep your bias in check, or your biases in check. We all have biases. And if you're a strong stakeholder in a particular program, you'll probably only see the good news stories, not all the stories. Or if you've been seeking change in a program, you might only see the bad news stories with the status quo, not all the stories. So we all do it. It's part of being a human being. But wait till all of the data is in before you make a decision, is what I say.
Right. Sounds good. So in our next episode, we've been looking inward in this episode, and we're going to look out. What are we going to be looking for?
So in this case, what we're looking outward to is the research base, the evidence base that sits under the effective teaching of reading. So we'll pull that apart and give you tools that make sure that the elements of effective reading programs are visible in your reading program, and you can identify that you're doing it or not doing it well.
So between now and our next episode, we're asking principals to get cracking, whether it's them, their team, whoever they've delegated the responsibility to, use that process, go out and collect their reading data,
Yep.
and be ready to look outwards for our next episode.
Yeah, and you can start on this now. We are expecting the assessment check-ins in coming weeks. There is no reason why, especially the longitudinal things, you can't do the 2018, 2019 data set and have 2020s ready, to use when it gets there.
Fantastic. We'll see you next time.
Bye.